Hi, it's Makaela here. Thanks for listening to my podcast. What you're about to listen to is an old episode of my podcast, The Midlife Awakening, which has now been replaced with the Deliberately Transformed Woman podcast. You'll still find some golden takeaways in these old episodes, but if you're the type of person who wants to discover and let go of the things that are holding you back in life by busting through fear and procrastination, overcoming imposter syndrome, and stepping into a life that is fulfilling, courageous, and intentional, then my new podcast episodes, starting from episode 21, are the ones you're looking for. You're listening to episode 5 of the Midlife Awakening podcast with Makaela Moore. Welcome to the Midlife Awakening podcast. I'm Makaela Moore, your host and certified transformation coach. I'm a 40-something woman who nerds out on brain science and believes every woman should be financially independent. This podcast is for women navigating their midlife who want to learn the secrets to unlocking their brain and freeing themselves from everything that holds them back so they can create lasting change in their lives, because everything is possible. Join me each week for conversations about the midlife and tips and tricks to hack your subconscious brain so you can deliberately transform your life and ultimately create your own financial security. First time here? Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Enjoy! Hey, welcome to episode 5. I can't believe it has already been over a month since I launched my podcast. The time is just flying by so quickly. I feel like I'm still trying to get the hang of it all and all that goes into, producing a podcast episode each week. And I feel like I'm just sort of playing and tweaking each week to produce the best episode I can. But at the same time, I'm very mindful that as a recovering perfectionist, that it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. One of my coaches says 70% perfect is success and 100% equals failure. It took me a while to get that, but when you think about it, perfect just doesn't exist. So when we do try to go for 100% perfect, we just never really reach it, and therefore we fail. He also said that each of us has an ability to serve and help others, and we don't have to be perfect to do so. The first episode I released, I spent almost a day editing out every single breath and sound and and ah. But that was my perfectionism at play. I want to be able to create content and spend more time serving my audience. So I'm going to be aiming for that 70% success rate from now on. And I won't be polishing the editing to within an inch of its life. Breathe. But doing a 70% job is not easy for someone who has always believed that to do a good job or to be a valuable person, that I had to do a perfect job. Otherwise, I was somehow less than or not good enough if the job I did wasn't good enough, which, as you can imagine, leads to all sorts of procrastination. But this leads me to today's topic, which is confirmation bias, or what some may see as the rose-coloured glasses effect of our brain on our life. Sort of. A simple definition of confirmation bias is that it's a human reflex that interprets new information as being supportive of the opinions or beliefs that we already hold. We actually search for things in the world that support beliefs we already have. We look for evidence in the world to prove that what we already believe is true and that we are right. We also tend to avoid things that disprove our beliefs because we humans do not like being wrong. So by seeking out more evidence to prove a belief and less evidence that could possibly disprove our belief, we're actually then reinforcing the belief, which can perpetuate into a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the more you believe it, the more evidence you will seek to prove it, and the more evidence you find to prove it, the more you're going to believe it. So if I were to use my perfectionism as the example, I wouldn't be listening to my coach who says that 70% perfect is success and 100% is failure. I would hear that and I would disregard it as rubbish. I would immediately make it wrong in my head, and I wouldn't believe a word of it. Instead, I'd listen to someone who was saying things like, near enough is not good enough. You've got to put in 110% to everything you do. You can't release or publish something that's not 100% perfect. I'd believe those things because they would prove my own belief true. And I would then get caught in that perfectionistic spiral and never get anything published. But I'd be right, in my own head anyway. And it can apply to many situations. So let's just say it's our state or our federal election. It's a time when people can get really fired up about what they believe in. So let's say, for argument's sake, you support the Blue Party and you really love them and you believe everything they say. You'll really only want to talk to other people who also support the Blue Party because they're confirming your belief for you, and in your mind, you are right. You will also not really want to be hearing from any of the Red Party supporters because they're going to be talking up their party and policies and probably putting yours down. Your brain doesn't want you to be proven wrong in your beliefs or opinion, despite any facts presented to you. So your brain disregards anything the other party has to say as just rubbish. It will then seek to find all the information it can to prove your opinion and beliefs are right and that anything else is wrong, regardless of actual facts. And this process then becomes a bit of a cycle or spiral where the more you believe your beliefs, the more your brain will seek further evidence to prove that they're right, and the more you will believe them. We and our brains do not want to be proven wrong because it just feels terrible to be wrong, and being proven right does all sorts of good things for our self-esteem and our confidence. But if we never question our beliefs, we can never change our beliefs. And if we never change our beliefs, then we'll be stuck exactly where we are, or worse, heading backwards into our future. So I've talked in past episodes about everything in life being a story. The same goes for our beliefs. They are just stories that we have either been told or we've told to ourselves. But just because they feel real or right doesn't mean they are real or right. We were told all sorts of things as kids that either weren't true or we interpreted incorrectly, because that information went into our young, impressionable, sponge-like brains and we had no evidence to the contrary. We simply believed whatever it was as truth. Now, what most people don't realise is that just because we were told something as kids, and just because we believe in something that may or may not be true, that none of it matters anyway, because they're all just stories in our heads and we can change them, particularly if they are not serving us. Things don't happen to us in life. Things happen for us, and it is up to us as to how we interpret things. We can choose to let things happen to us and be reactive and go into victim mode and blame others and generally be miserable, or we can take responsibility for our thinking and how we respond to people and situations. We are the thinker of our thoughts. We are not our thoughts. When we are thinking angry thoughts, most people say they are angry, but they're not an angry. They are just thinking angry thoughts. So for us to make big changes in our lives, there are a few things we need to come to terms with. First is that we are the thinker of our thoughts. And with that, we need to take a 50-foot overview of our thoughts. We need to get out of our own head and observe our thoughts as if from up above. We need to question our thoughts and examine them from that higher place in a non-judgmental and non-discriminatory way. The second big thing we need to do to get unstuck and make big changes in our lives is to question our current belief systems and be willing to prove ourselves wrong. It will feel horrible to start with because humans just don't like being wrong. But if we want to enjoy the benefits of an amazing new way of life for the long term, then we need to do hard stuff in the short term. So to get back to confirmation bias, in the human resources field, which is my background, We used the term filters to describe how people viewed other people or situations. And it's very similar to confirmation bias. So in HR, we refer to positive and negative filters. So if I'm telling you about a great new coffee shop down the road and I'm raving about it, I'm placing a positive filter over that coffee shop. And when you go there, you're going to arrive with all these ideas and expectations of an amazing place. Your brain will seek out all the evidence possible that the cafe is as amazing as I made it sound. Even in the face of perhaps the bad service you might receive that day, you may dismiss that as just them having an off day, etc. Because your brain was pre-wired with a bias to believe that this cafe was amazing, and because your brain likes to be right, it seeks to confirm that bias. Alternatively, if you were told about the horrible teacher at school who picked on the kids and treated them terribly or spoke questionably about other parents, when you go in for your parent-teacher interview with that same teacher, because there's been a negative filter effectively placed over that teacher, you're going to go into that interview with your guard up. You're going to look for all the evidence to prove that she is as horrible as you've been told. Your brain will not trust when the teacher is being nice to you, because that must be fake. And yet, the very next parent who's been told the same teacher is really firm but nice and thoughtful and tactful in how she deals with parents, and they're going to have a very different experience because their brain is pre-wired to look for the positives. So for argument's sake, let's just say two kids are identical in class and their two sets of parents going to the parent-teacher interview to hear the exact same information about their child. Because they go in with different pre-existing beliefs about the teacher, they come out of that interview with very different experiences. Your brain would use everything that teacher said to prove your belief of her was correct, whether it was positive or negative. And when they do or say something in exact contrast to what you believe about them, your brain will make up a story to justify it so you can maintain your belief system. So if we get back to our thoughts and we think about our thoughts, how many of us have never really given much thought to our thoughts? Our thoughts create our beliefs. So if we change our thoughts, we can ultimately change our beliefs. But our brains resist change of any kind because they like to be efficient and protect us from the unknown. Even if the belief that we hold is hurting us in some way, and logically we know that our brain will still be resistant to that change because those beliefs are cemented into our subconscious brain, particularly the ones from childhood. We don't go around consciously thinking about our thoughts or beliefs for the most part, and therefore we don't realise that our thoughts are driving our confirmation bias in thinking that things are this way or that way. Most people don't recognise that their underlying thoughts are there and that their brain is constantly seeking evidence to prove our thoughts are true. Our thoughts and beliefs will feel true because we've been believing and proving them for many years, so of course it feels true. If you believe that your life is bad or that bad things always happen to you, your brain will find evidence to prove it true. And then you can say, see, I told you it was true. And because of that, you believe it even more. So it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. You believe it to be true, so your brain finds evidence to prove it, which then makes you believe it more. And then the cycle just keeps going on. But it doesn't mean that it is actually true. The only time we can make changes and really shift our belief systems is if something is really blindingly obvious to us and we are willing to go through the hard shit and feel uncomfortable about it in order to change our belief system. Some of us are so stuck in our confirmation bias that we don't realise it, and we can become so blind to what is really happening to us, particularly in relationships, because our brain is constantly in a state of confirmation bias. If we started a relationship with someone who we thought was amazing, despite evidence often to the contrary, our brain will seek to find all the good in that person. We've all seen it happen, and it's happened to me in the past too. You might have seen a friend in this situation, or it might have even been you. I was in a relationship many years ago where we were together, it was almost 2 years, and in the beginning I thought he was wonderful, but as time went on and as things happened, I clung onto that relationship with all of my confirmation bias, believing that he was good for me. Even when things felt bad, I still believed he was good for me. He turned out to not be so good for me. When we broke up, I was devastated, and I believed that I would never find anyone else suitable for me. Then as time went on, I found out information about him, about, things he had done while we were together, and also things that my friends thought of him. And suddenly I was seeing him in a whole new light, and my opinion and my beliefs around him and our relationship were completely flipped on their head. While I was in the relationship, my confirmation bias was in full swing, constantly telling or showing me how wonderful he was, when in actual fact, he treated me like shit. I was completely blind to his behaviour at the time because my brain was trying to protect me. Luckily, I wised up and eventually did find my perfect husband, which even if he wasn't perfect, I wouldn't know because my brain would protect me from that. But he is perfect. If we're looking for proof that someone is amazing, we'll find it. If I believe I'm worthless or hopeless, then I can look for evidence and make up stories about the things I do or don't do to prove that true. Some people can use the same situation to prove or disprove something about themselves. So, just as an example, let's take child abuse. Some people see themselves as heroes and tough for having survived it and believe that nothing can take them down, whereas others view themselves as victims for having suffered through the same situation, and therefore they end up becoming victims throughout their whole life. Because they are perpetuating the thoughts and the beliefs in their mind, and their brain keeps confirming it, they keep showing up in life as victims and have subconsciously disempowered themselves. When you are in confirmation bias, you believe something so deeply that often being presented with facts that contradict your beliefs won't even change your belief. The only thing that will change your belief, and therefore your confirmation bias, is the conscious decision to change your belief, which is easier said than done because a change of belief often means changing the core identity of who we are. I'll go into identity in another episode, but everything we are and everything we do or don't do in life comes back to our core identity. Making the decision to change your beliefs is difficult because our thought patterns and our beliefs are habitual. And once something is habitual in our brains, they're easy because our brains, they like to be efficient and conserve energy. So if we're trying to change our thoughts and our beliefs and ultimately our habits, then we're going to be met with lots of resistance from our subconscious brain. Because our ingrained thoughts and beliefs are easy, even if they're negative beliefs, it is often easier to keep thinking and believing them than it is to create new, positive, empowering thoughts and beliefs. Without making that conscious decision to change our thoughts and therefore our beliefs, we will just keep reverting to the stories in our head of what has happened in our past, which is just our version of a story and not proper facts. And we will keep believing and seeking confirmation of it. And we simply become prisoners of our own confirmation bias. But if you do make the decision to change your thoughts and beliefs, it is basically the same as admitting you've been wrong all these years. Your brain will hate being wrong, and you will experience lots of resistance to the change. The moment we are told we're wrong about something, we are immediately defensive because we're hardwired to protect ourselves from being wrong. Your brain will see these changes as a threat to all the knowledge that you've accumulated and have already proven true through your confirmation bias, so it won't change without a fight. So you'll need to be super committed to examining and changing your stories, thoughts, and beliefs. But armed with this knowledge, you'll be able to see things for what they really are and how they are happening. You won't be so hard on yourself and you'll have some compassion for yourself. Changing our belief systems and therefore our identity is a very humbling experience. Don't be so committed to being right about something just for the sake of being right. Instead, be committed to making incremental changes to your thoughts and beliefs that no longer serve you. Contradictory information is something we normally turn away from, but you want to start turning towards it in order to flip those non-serving thoughts and beliefs on their head. You do have to have some compassion for your brain. It thinks it is in danger and that something scary is going on when it has to make these big changes. If you understand that the brain feels threatened when certainty is questioned on long-held beliefs, and you know that you would rather be right and in pain than wrong and vulnerable, then you can approach this process from such a positive space. Warren Buffett said, "What human beings are best at doing is interpreting all new information so that their prior conclusions remain intact." This is very good if your prior conclusions are amazing, but not so good if they're bad. Be willing to be wrong about yourself. It may feel like a grieving process, regardless of how disserving those old beliefs were. Those negative things that don't serve you are going to be painful to let go of because your brain has been so attached to them. Your new focused thinking will take more effort and won't be as good to begin with, but eventually, through deliberate thought, your new belief system will become second nature to you, and your confirmation bias will once again serve you, but this time for good and not for evil. Everything you see in life will be wonderful and amazing because that is what your brain will be looking for. So use this natural tendency and reflex to your advantage and get exactly what you want in life. That's all for this week. If there's a topic that you'd love for me to cover, or if you have any questions about today's episode, please email me at Makaela@makaelamore.com. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. And that, my beautiful friends, is another episode of The Midlife Awakening. If you'd like more inspiration or to connect with other midlifers, head on over to my Facebook group, Deliberately Transformed. You'll find the link in the show notes. Until next time, cheers.